So yeah, we will be listening to a talk on spiritual friendship. It's the second part of the talk, and the theme today is associating with the wise. So with that, with great honor, I will pass it over to Bhante Akaliko.
Thank you so much, Aggie, and thank you once again to the Buddhist Library for inviting me to give this two-part talk series on spiritual friendship. I'll just begin by acknowledging the land on which I'm speaking to you from today and the custodians of that land, the Barramadigal people of the Darug Nation. And I pay my respects to our Darug elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that same respect to any First Nations person here today and First Nations people everywhere. And so this is the second part in this two-part series. Last week, which I'm just going to do a quick recap, and then we're going to do some meditation, and then we're going to hear about this idea of associating with the wise. So I'm going to share my screen in and out today. Okay, so that's good, spiritual friendship. And we started off last week, and I want to start off with this short introductory few lines from the Mangala Sutta, the Sutta on the highest blessings. And it starts out with these words, Asevanachit Balanam Panditanancha Sewana. Etam Mangalang Uttamam. So not to fraternize with fools. And that's what we looked at last week, hanging out with foolish people. Instead, we want to fraternize with the wise. And this is a high blessing. And this is the beginning of that sutta, which goes on to describe incredibly beautiful states of mind that come along with the spiritual path, leading all the way to enlightenment and seeing the Dharma for yourself. But it begins with this exhortation to make sure that you avoid fools and seek out the company of the wise. And so that's why I divided this series of talks into these two areas, looking at avoiding fools, and this time we'll be thinking about how we can associate with wise folk. So here we have an image of the Buddha talking to a group of different people, both people who are monks, people who are monks from different traditions, and people in the background there. And of course, I can't see any women in this image, which is a sad omission that we see in Buddhist art, but we know that women were around. You know that there was trans and non-binary people around as well. And everyone can be a friend of the Buddha. We consider the Buddha as our number one Kalyana Mitta. That's our number one spiritual friend. And he did divide people into these categories of wise and foolish. And we're just hearing from one of the participants who was a little bit surprised that there was this division and how it helped her understand how we can have different qualities of friendships. And this is something that I also was really excited to learn on the path, that there is actually a difference between our friends, a different quality that comes from association with different people. You might remember last week we had some similes, like the rotten fish wrapped up in grass that stinks and that pollutes that grass with a stench of decay. Or you might remember the image of incense being wrapped in a leaf and how that beautiful scent of sandalwood perfumes the leaf. And so this idea of association rubbing off on us is something that the Buddha used quite often to talk about the quality of friends that we have. And there's a sutta that I wanted to mention last week that I didn't get to, but I thought it was a good refresher for this idea of separating people into these two categories. And again, a reminder just a reminder that we are also in these two categories, and that we have these qualities of foolishness in ourselves and wisdom in ourselves, and all other people also have these categories of foolishness and wisdom within them. But remember, what we learned last week was that it's the behavior that sets that, it's the behavior that accounts for that description. Someone who behaves foolishly can be called a fool. Someone who behaves wisely can be called a wise person. So we want to cultivate those qualities that lead to wisdom and abandon those qualities that cause us to be foolish. So this is something we try to do for ourselves. Of course, we can't control others. We can encourage them to be good, we can point out where they've done some harm to us or to others or to themselves. We can't control them. So we can only really change our own minds, develop our own potential. We can't really control other people, but we can influence them. So in this session today, we'll be looking at not only how our association with good friends helps us progress on the path, but how can we be good friends to others? How can we inspire others? And it's that inspiration rather than trying to change, that good association, a good example that we can share that will help others to see a different way of being. But it's not something that we can change about them. So it's an important distinction. But we have these qualities of foolishness and wisdom within us, as does everybody. And so a little content warning. There's going to be some graphic imagery and strong language. And so I just wanted to revisit some of this strong imagery that the Buddha shared when he talked about foolish people. And so we have the first one, which is this idea of a snake that has been crawling through shit. And here is, of course, an Australian example of the kind of worries that we can encounter in Australia. This is a diamond python that was found in a toilet. And I'm sure this isn't the way the Buddha thought about it, but this is the kind of closest image I could find. And he said that even if this snake doesn't bite you, it's been crawling through poo. And so it's going to tarnish you with this disgusting smell as it rubs against you. And the other image he used in this sutta, which is called about being disgusted, you should be disgusted, was the image of a boil full of pus. Every time you strike that boil, it emits more and more pus. So these are quite visceral images that the Buddha used. And he said, a person who associates with an inferior goes downhill, but associating with an equal, you'll never decline. Following the best, you'll quickly rise up. So you should keep company with people who are better than you. And I share this because last week we had a question of like, okay, so if you're going to hang out with bad people and they rub off on us, how exactly does it work that associating with good people rubs off on us? And in the sutra I just shared, the Buddha says that at the very least, hanging out with a good person, someone who has good qualities, a good reputation, we will receive a good reputation too, because we've got good friends in our company. Other people will look at that and they'll say, oh, they must be a good person. And so this is a kind of very low level change that we might see in ourselves when we hang out with good people. And it kind of appeals to our vanity in a way. We want to be liked. We want people to respect us. We want people to think that we're a good person. And so we borrow, in a way, this shine from good people, and hopefully something of their qualities will rub off on us. And we'll discover more about how that might happen and what it means for good qualities to rub off on us in a little while. the Buddha talked about spiritual friendship as an external factor. So we have all these internal factors in our lives, these minds of ours, these monkey minds, full of changeability, full of desire, full of hatred. And the things that go on in our mind are internal factors. But there's also the external factors that influence our behavior. And so here the Buddha says, I do not see a single factor that is so very helpful as good friendship. Why? Because someone who has a good friend gives up the unskillful and develops the skillful. And so this is already starting to show perhaps the kind of friendship that the Buddha wanted to encourage. A friendship that encourages us to give up unskillful behavior, to cultivate skillful behavior. And we'll look at what distinguishes a skillful and unskillful person in others and also in ourselves a bit later. And then just to hit you with another sutta, this is the recollection on Kalyana Mitta, the recollection on spiritual friendship that we did last week for our guided meditation. And we're going to do it again this week, and we'll see perhaps we might develop more in this practice because it's good to keep doing these sorts of meditations over and over again. We deepen our understanding of how this practice might work. So I said last week, this is from the Nandya Sutta, and this is the phrases that I used to talk to you when I was doing the meditation with you. I'm fortunate, so fortunate to have good friends who advise and instruct me out of kindness and compassion. In this way, the Buddha says, you should, I've gone too far. In this way, you should establish mindfulness internally based on good friends. And so I mentioned last week, this is one of the anussitis, one of the recollections that we can do. And this recollection on spiritual friendship is just the very beginning of a meditation sequence that will occur. So once we have mindfulness based on spiritual friendship, gladness will appear in our mind. We feel good. We feel so happy and glad, joyful that we've got spiritual friends who instruct us out of kindness. This is the second thing that happens. We're so lucky we've got spiritual friends. We reflect upon it and joy appears in our mind. Should feel joyful, right? We've got good friends who care about us and care about our big picture spiritual development. And so this is a source of joy in our lives and a source of joy in our meditation practice. So important to get this joy in our hearts. Joy is what leads the mind deeper into meditation. We want to be there. We're enjoying it. We're having a good time. When we've got joy in our hearts, we're not distracted by things from the outside world, like going off for a nice cup of coffee or having a piece of chocolate cake or watching Netflix. We've got joy in our hearts. We don't have that anger and hatred coming up either. So our mind is in line with the Dhamma. So good, so wholesome, so positive to have a state of joy brought about by something so wholesome like spiritual friendship. That joy deepens, becomes piti, that rush of good feeling through the body and the mind, that zest, that enthusiasm for meditation that you can feel. It lifts the body and makes you feel really like you want to be there now. You feel so good. Piti coming up through the body. Piti is described as being like the glue that helps our mind stay on the mental object. It's the enthusiasm for the meditation that we want to bring up. And this comes about because of that joy based on spiritual wholesome friendships. And then the body becomes so relaxed and comfortable, kaya passaddhi, this feeling of everything just settling down, all those external stimulations of the body just falling away. The mind is moving from the external world deeper and deeper and deeper into the mental world of meditation. And from that, we get bliss, sukha. We get this really deep happiness in our meditation. And this deep happiness, again, helps us want to stay in the meditation, to remain there, to become more and more content, more and more still, more and more peaceful. And it's this happiness that draws the mind deeper into that stillness we call samadhi. So this is the pathway of the meditation based on that recollection of having good friends. We get the joy, we get the piti, we get the bodily tranquility, we get the bliss, and then we get the deepness that comes with samadhi in our practice. And so this is how the Buddha encouraged us to recollect spiritual friendship. This is a path to meditation that is really useful because we start with a busy thinking mind. We gradually get the joy up, and then that busy thinking mind becomes very subdued and quiet and calm. And that's the vehicle for our meditation to continue. So sometimes people might think with these recollections that they're not proper meditation, that they're things like talking to yourself or distracting yourself or not serious enough, not hardcore enough. But actually, the anusatis are very powerful, and they're powerful because they're based on these wholesome subjects like giving and ethical conduct or spiritual friendship. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to see how this meditation can work. And to do that, we're going to need to take a comfortable posture. So settle in to your pose. Take a few moments to set yourself up. Probably going to meditate for about 20 minutes. We're going to do a little introduction to help us settle, and then we'll do the recollection of spiritual friendship. Good. So, knowing that there's all these spiritual friends around us who we can trust and relax with, we too can let go of worrying about being judged or worry about bad people in the world doing bad things. We're here with good people, so we are able to, in this moment, let go. Let go of all the worries. Let go of all the activities. Let go of all the things we want to do, places we want to be. And have that sense of comfort and ease that comes along with hanging out with good friends. We can just be ourselves. No need to perform or impress anyone. This helps us to relax, helps us to let go, to discover that sense of ease within ourselves. And so you can spend a few minutes just relaxing through the body. letting go, tightness or tension. Just feeling all the muscles relax. Scanning the body, releasing, relaxing, softening. And as you relax, maybe you notice it feels good to let go. Feels good to relax. And perhaps you see that when we let go and relax, mind naturally becomes calm, peaceful. And that feels good too. And so we'll use this relaxed body and this calm, quiet mind to begin our practice of recollecting spiritual friendship. How fortunate, how very fortunate that I have spiritual friends. We're surrounded by spiritual friends. Maybe someone comes into your mind, someone who shares the spiritual path with you, someone who, out of kindness and compassion, helps to support your spiritual practice. It could be a teacher, the author of a book you read. Could be someone you see at Dharma talks. Could be someone who took you to a meditation retreat. Whoever it is, we can be so grateful to have a friend like this. Cares for us. Who shows love and compassion. And that gratitude is so beautiful. How wonderful. How lucky I am. How fortunate. How very fortunate to have such spiritual friends. You can allow yourself to feel good. Allow a smile. Allow your heart to open. To say, thank you. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your love. Every drop of Dharma I have learned has been taught to me by others, by good spiritual friends. How lucky I am. How fortunate. have their help on this path. So grateful. I'm not alone. And in my life, so many spiritual friends, so many Kalyana Mittas, care, love, and support me. And having this gratitude is helping to open the heart. Maybe you see a feeling of warmth, feeling of gladness within you. I can be glad. I am fortunate. Having spiritual friends is indeed a source of joy. Can you feel it? That feeling of gladness, warm, comforting, a happiness connected with what is wholesome and good. So pure and beautiful. Allow this joy be immersed in your heart, body. Allow it to feel good. And so for the next few minutes, reflecting upon spiritual friendship, remembering your good friends, remembering the wisdom you have learnt from them, allowing that feeling of gladness to fill your heart, allowing the joy connected with the wholesome to permeate your mind. And now as we come towards the end of this short session, reflecting, looking back, how does it feel to recollect spiritual friendship? Did you have a sense of gratitude? Did it make you feel glad to have such friends who care for us, have kindness and compassion? You feel that gladness in the body and mind. In this way, we can understand cause and effect of the things in our life affect our meditation. Now you can relax your awareness, coming back to the space surrounded by good spiritual friends, surrounded by wise people. So I hope you enjoyed that practice. It's something that I think we can encourage in each other to reflect from time to time on the importance of having spiritual friends. And as we deepen our practice of recollecting friendship, then we can understand why the Buddha emphasized spiritual friendship so much in his talks and how central it is to the Buddhist path. And this is something that I think perhaps in Western spiritual communities especially, I don't know, we're quite individualistic when it comes to our spiritual practice. We often will just turn up to a place and do some meditation and go home, or maybe we won't really connect with other humans at the Dharma talk. And we might not value that sense of friendship and community, perhaps as we should. But now that things are getting back to a bit more face-to-face, a bit more community-engaged events, that we can really take the opportunity to develop those spiritual friendships, because these are what help sustain our spiritual practice. Okay, so moving right along, because we're already running out of time. So this is an image. I was thinking of that question before, of how do spiritual friendships impact our mind? How does associating with good people help us along the spiritual path? And so this is an image of monkey see, monkey do. And this is perhaps at its very basic level what is going on when we're associating with good people. We're learning from them. They're conditioning us. Remember that all of our lives are conditioned, so many things going on. We're influenced by so many different factors. And friendship is one of those. Friendship is an important part of the spiritual path. And so friendship is actually our spiritual practice, and associating with good friends is part of that practice. Being a spiritual friend to others is part of that practice. It's such an important part of the path. So who are we being conditioned by? Hopefully not the monkey. And I think this was something that was even difficult for even people who had been ordained as monks at the time of the Buddha to grasp the significance of. Here we have an image of a very sick monk who had dysentery and was covered in his own filth and left alone by the monks who lived with him. They didn't care for him. They didn't show him spiritual friendship. They said, well, he doesn't do anything for us, so why should we care about him? And when the Buddha found out about this, he was like, you foolish people, like, this isn't my training. This isn't how I taught you to be. This man is sick. We should care for him. And the Buddha set this good example himself of cleaning the man up. And here we have the monks in the background there looking perhaps rather sheepish and ashamed. And here the Buddha is showing us how to be a good spiritual friend. And so this modeling is a really important part of why we need to associate with people who are wise. It's not enough for us just to associate with them, however. We want to make sure that we are monkey see, monkey do, that we are actually emulating their good conduct. And that's why the Buddha says in this sutta, what does it mean to be accomplished in good friendship? It's when someone resides in a town or a village, and in that place, there are householders or their children, young and old, who are mature in their conduct. They're accomplished in these good qualities of faith, ethics, generosity, and wisdom. So there's good people around, right? There's good people modeling this behavior all the time. And we associate with those people. We converse and engage with them. And the important thing here, and this is what I wanted to emphasize by showing this sutta, we emulate that same kind of quality that they have. We emulate their qualities. We don't just hope that their good behavior will rub off on us. We actually need to emulate, to copy, to imitate, to do. We need to be the monkey that is doing, not just seeing. And that's how we will develop faith, ethics, generosity, and wisdom. And that's what it means to be accomplished in good friendship. And so there's a difference, perhaps, with the kind of expectation the Buddha puts on us. We had those images before of the snake moving through the poo, and that stench will rub off on us. Same in the suttas that we looked at last week. But if we want to do better, then we can't just hope that people's good qualities are going to rub off on us. That's only part of what makes a good person. That's only part of what develops wisdom. It's the action of doing, the understanding for yourself why we need to engage in these good actions, good qualities, develop our minds in this way. This is what's important, the actual doing. And I think even at the time of the Buddha, there was people who just thought, if I just hang out with the Buddha, if I just see the Buddha's image, then that's enough of a blessing. It's good enough. The Buddha says associate with the wise. But they didn't get to develop the mind. And last week we heard that wonderful simile too of the soup spoon that is in the soup but doesn't taste the flavor. And we need to be like the taster. We need to actually experience the taste of these good qualities. Can't be a dumb spoon. We need to actually experience these qualities for ourselves. And so, I'll just go back. So last week, I mentioned the distinction that Bhikkhu Bodhi made between the horizontal level of friendship, which is the kind of social equals, people like us talking to each other, hanging out with each other, and the kind of friendships that we have in a mundane kind of sense. It's still spiritual, but it's like an everyday kind of friendship. That's the horizontal level, Bhikkhu Bodhi says. And then there's the vertical level, which is the kind of transcendental spirituality, the kind of friendship that will lead us out of suffering. And we'll look at that in a little bit. But it's important to remember that this other level of friendship, there are also these really good qualities that we need to develop. And actually developing those is part of our spiritual journey. So we don't want to just kind of just think that we can just springboard ourselves to enlightenment, and that reading the suttas or hearing a good teacher is just going to springboard us. It's part of a process this development, part of us becoming better people ourselves by understanding what it is to have a good friend, by emulating them. And so recognizing, I suppose, the kind of models we want to seek out, the kind of models who are going to inform our own development and who will then imitate. This is what we can learn from this everyday, mundane kind of level of spiritual friendship. So it's still really important. I don't want to diminish it. And so last week we looked at the same sutta. We looked at the kind of bad friends, the friends who we should avoid, the fake friends, the Buddha called them. And this week we're going to be looking at their corollaries, their counterparts. And this time they're the true friends, the people who we want to hang out with, the people who we should recognize as good-hearted friends. So there's 4 types, just as there was 4 people we wanted to avoid. First is the helper. Second is the good times and bad times friend. And the third, the counselor. The fourth, the compassionate. And so I think last week we looked at the taker and the talker and the flatterer and the spender. And so they're the opposites of these types of friends. So the Buddha says that we can recognize a good-hearted friend who is a helper on these 4 grounds. They guard you when you're negligent. So they're always looking out for us, even if we're doing something a bit silly. And they also guard our property, our things. They care about our belongings when we're negligent. They keep you safe in times of danger. And when something needs doing, they give you twice the amount of money that you need. And so here already we see that this person is a more evolved friend because they care about more than themselves. They care about us. So their investment in us is true. It's good-hearted. They're looking out for us. They're caring for us. They give when we need stuff. Such beautiful qualities. And sometimes I think perhaps we take friends like this a little bit for granted because we know actually that there's a lot of people out there who aren't like this. That's why we want to hang out with someone who is a helper, and we learn from those good people. And this is a little meme. I did search for some memes on friendship because there are so many good, inspiring memes out there on the internet. And this to me was a perfect image of what a good friend would be. You know, those friends that you can just rely upon, who are always there for you. This is a real helper. And it's something that should bring joy into your heart. Oh my gosh, I have friends like this. How lucky I am. How fortunate I am. So there's this beautiful quality of friendship which delights our hearts. So that's the first good-hearted friend, a helper. Second type of good friend is the good times and bad time friend. So this person tells you secrets. They trust you. They keep your secrets. You trust them. This is a friendship that is based in equality, that's based on a mutuality, which is very beautiful. That means you can relax and be comfortable with a person like this. They don't abandon you in times of trouble, so they're not a fair-weathered friend. That's probably the reason we call this a good times, bad times friend. They don't abandon you when you need help. And this is quite a lofty aim, that even give their life for you. This is such a beautiful form of friendship. And I think I have a couple of friends like this. I don't know for a fact they would give their life for me. I'd like to think they would. I'd like to think that I would give my life for them. Couldn't say for sure, but it's a beautiful aspiration to have. And again, we're seeing this movement from maybe like a selfish person who's not a good friend, a friend who is in it for their own purposes or only when it benefits them or helps them, and someone who instead is thinking about the other person, caring for someone other than themselves. That's a good friend. And maybe this is about the secrets, maybe we already know too much about each other. And that's one thing I can really appreciate with good friends. They know you, and yet still they want to be with you, still they want to hang out with you. I mean, how wonderful is that? They know you sometimes better than you know yourself, and still they want to be your friends. So
excuse me, Bhante. Sorry, I think we can't see your screen.
Oh, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just stopped sharing because I wanted to look at you, but it's okay. I'm going to go back to sharing screen now.
Oh yeah, thank you.
You mind?
Yeah, there we go. That's working now.
The last couple of slides, just because I think we missed them while you were talking.
Okay. Did you see this one?
No.
No.
I think from the meme that you mentioned that you thought exemplified friendship, we haven't seen from that point.
Okay. So anyway, I don't know what happened. I've got no idea. But this is the good times, bad times friend. They tell you their secrets, they keep your secrets, they don't abandon you in times of trouble, and they give their life for you. And then I said this one is about good friends. They know too much about you already, and you'll be good friends with them forever because they have that quality of seeing you, knowing you, and still loving you. And the next good friend that we should watch out for is the counselor. So we can see that a counselor is going to have a good heart, and that good heart is going to benefit us because they keep us from doing bad. So last week, you might remember we had the flatterer. So this is the opposite of the flatterer. The flatterer didn't stop us from doing bad. They encouraged us to do both bad and good. And that's an important distinction, that a real friend will prevent us from doing bad. A flatterer will just tell us what we want to hear. But a good friend who's a counselor will keep us from doing bad and support us to do good. A good friend will teach us what we don't know. And this can be very mundane, people who just want to help us out with a particular task that we need assistance with, or importantly, as a spiritual friend, helping us to understand the Dhamma better. And this is the path to heaven is mentioned here. So this is a path that comes from doing good things like being generous, having ethical conduct, studying the Dhamma. These are qualities, meditating also, that will lead to wholesome states now and also good rebirths in the future. And in this case, it's referred to as going to a heavenly realm. And so this meme, a good friend, the best friend, says here, will never let you do anything stupid on your own. But of course, in the Dhamma, we would think a good friend would never let you do anything wholesome alone. They'll always help you out. They'll always show you the right way. So the last category is a friend who is compassionate, and they're a good-hearted friend because they don't delight when things go badly for you. Instead, they delight in your good fortune. This is that rejoicing, that mudita that we have access to. When our friend is getting a promotion or wins the lottery, we shouldn't have envy or jealousy. We should celebrate with them. When they do something good, we rejoice in their goodness. They're our friend. We, by association, have this joy too. We care about their goodness. We care about their good fortune. A good friend will stop other people from criticizing us. And I think this is a true friend also. They're invested in your reputation. They're invested in your goodness, which they recognize themselves. And so instead, they encourage praise. This is something that even at the time of the Buddha, I'll just stop sharing for a second. Ananda was really sad and despondent because the Buddha was about to pass away. Ananda was the Buddha's attendant for so many years, his personal assistant. And he was so sad that the Buddha was going to be passing. And the Buddha, instead of criticizing him for being tearful and crying and being a bit of a hot mess, instead, the Buddha praised him and said, oh, but Ananda, and he even went and shared this with other people. Ananda is such a good friend, such a good teacher. When Ananda talks, people love it. They don't want him to stop. And he heaped praise upon this person. And this is something that I reflect upon a lot, actually, that praise is something that we actually don't do enough of. And it's like watering the flowers. We want to give a lot of water to people's good qualities. We want to give them a lot of praise when they do something good. We want to encourage their good qualities, help build their spiritual growth. And so we do that through praise. It's something I always do. When people put food into my bowls, I always say, very good. And when people have done a good action, I love to praise it. It makes me feel so good because I know that it's helping them see the benefits of doing these types of activities by doing this kind of practice. And so praise is something that can really transform someone else's mind because it's that conditioning, that influence that we have on their practice, on their life. We can help point out the good things that they do and not always point out those bad things, not water the weeds, but water the flowers. And people will grow in this way. And I think that praise is something that we probably don't do often enough for our friends and family, co-workers, but it's something that's very powerful because it is about that conditioning. It is about building that influence in their minds of what is good. And so these are the 4 types of good friend that we find in the Sigalovada Sutta. And here this meme is saying, if you don't have a friend like this who hypes you up, then get a new friend. And this is that wonderful feeling of a friend who supports you and encourages you. Yeah, they've got your back. It's such a beautiful thing. It really lifts your heart. It makes you feel less alone in the world. And it brings joy into your mind, having a friend like that. And so one of my favorite genres of meme is what's called ominous positivity. And this is a good example of a ominous positive meme. Here we have someone about to hit someone over the head. It says, with my overwhelming amount of love. This is what we can do for our friends. We can give unconditional love and support for free to these people in our lives. And here's a little image of a dog being sheltered by a kind human who's holding the umbrella over them. And this for me was just a little meme that kind of made my heart lift a little bit, thinking of these kinds of friendships that we can have in our lives that are just they're so mundane, but so beautiful, just someone who does a small little thing for you. Such a beautiful thing to have in your life. And that we can be these people too is very special. It's not enough to have that coming in one-sided, but what are we putting out in our own lives? And so this is that kind of level of spiritual friendship, which I think some people might miss out on the importance of developing as a spiritual practice. We might think, as I've told you, and we're about to see again, that the real meaning of Kalyana Mitta, the real purpose of Kalyana Mitta is to come out of suffering and to get enlightened. And that's true, that's real, that's exactly what a Kalyana Mitta is. But part of that process is developing the qualities that lead to that result. And friendship is one way that we can develop qualities of kindness, love, rejoicing in goodness. And so the Buddha is the number one Kalyana Mitta. And it was the arising of the Buddha in the world, that moment of enlightenment, that began this process of influencing others, showing them the way, leading them on the path to enlightenment. And that's why the Buddha is our number one Kalyana Mitta. He discovered this path. He didn't keep it to himself. He shared it with others, and he showed us how to get there, showed us the qualities that we need to develop within ourselves to get there. And that's why he's such a good friend to us. And I'm revisiting the same sutta we looked at last week, which is the locus classici, is that how it's pronounced? The number one classical text on spiritual friendship in the suttas, which many of you will know. And that is when Ananda says to the Buddha, good friends and companions, they're half of the spiritual life. And the Buddha says, no, don't say that, Ananda, don't say that. Good friends, companions, and associates, the whole of the spiritual life. And again, I want to make this distinction between the way we might think about spiritual friendship on that mundane level, which is really important, really significant, really powerful, really good for our own spiritual growth and for the growth of others, and how the Buddha conceptualized it in this sutta, which is by saying that we can expect to cultivate and develop the Noble Eightfold Path when we have good spiritual friends. And so again, that's right view and right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right immersion, which relies upon seclusion, fading away, and ripens as letting go. So this is the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Buddha is a good friend to us because he taught us that path. And we have a responsibility to try to emulate that Eightfold Noble Path, which will take us to enlightenment. And again, the Buddha says, by relying on me as a good friend, sentient beings who are liable to rebirth, old age and death, to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness and distress, they are all freed from these things. They're freed from old age. They're freed from rebirth, from death, from suffering. And this is why the Buddha as Kalyana Mitta is so important to us. And this is that vertical form of friendship. We have someone who knows more than us, who shares the Dharma with us, and this allows for us to grow and develop. We need good teachers. We need good people like this to show us the way. If we don't have those, we might not develop those qualities ourselves. In the same way, you might see in schools or workplaces, toxic cultures, toxic behaviors. The monkey didn't see, the monkey can't do. It's really hard when you have these kind of conditioning forces at play where you don't learn about the things that we need to develop. And so in the same way that when you have a good corporate culture or a good school or a good friendship circle, these things impact you, they help you develop yourself. And the Noble Eightfold Path is the best thing that we can develop, because that leads to these things of abandoning all of those things that cause us suffering and ends up with freedom. And so this is why it's so good to read the suttas. So here's an old manuscript with lines of the Buddha's words, the things that were spoken by the Buddha, recorded and preserved for thousands of years. And so for me, when I encounter the suttas, it's like I'm listening to the Buddha. They're his words and the words of his disciples. They're the words of wise people who I can rely upon for good advice, for wisdom, who I can rely upon as friends. And although they're not here in front of me, they're not watching everything I do, they're not whispering in my ear, these good friends from the past, they're still helping by instructing and showing the right way to go. And I think this is an important part of the practice, actually, this having someone else who knows you as a spiritual friend, who is in a position of slightly more knowledge, is a really important part of the practice. This is why we seek out teachers, of course. So it's one thing to have access to the written words of a teacher like the Buddha and his disciples. It's one thing to have a commentary written by Buddhaghosa, or to have Dharma talks on YouTube or on podcasts where we receive that information. But it's another thing to have someone in our life who knows us and who can see what it is that we need to develop. Often, it's very difficult to see that for ourselves. It's hard for us to know ourselves. It's really difficult, actually. We can't see those things we need to develop sometimes because there are blind spots. It's hard to see what's in our blind spot. And so one of the roles that we see the Buddha in constantly throughout the suttas is this engagement with his students, where he knows the kinds of things that someone needs to develop, and he encourages them to do a certain kind of practice. And this is why it's so important to have spiritual communities with people that you trust and can rely upon, because we need this interaction. We need for someone to have an eye on us. And this is one of the reasons that Bhante Sujato is quite often, who's my good spiritual friend, my teacher, is often quite reluctant to offer advice for meditation or Dharma to people online or in anonymous forums or on the internet like this, where we can't see the person, we don't know them, because the advice that we give could really land in a really inappropriate way for that person. It could be something that they misunderstand or misinterpret. So it's really important to have real life spiritual friends who we can have a relationship with. And this is something that I think is sorely lacking in a lot of our Buddhist communities, because they can be quite transactional. You kind of pop up, give a teaching and disappear, or for the audience, they kind of pop up and they never get to ask the kind of questions that might lead to a more personal understanding of where they're at on the path with their teacher. So something that we should encourage more is this person-to-person spiritual interaction, but it takes time. And it means that people need to come and be in a space with people. And that's why on meditation retreats, it's really great, because you have this time where you can have daily interviews with people and get to know them better, and you can help them much more in their meditation. But if we don't have the Buddha around, we have a decline, like a descending level of people who can help us. I just wanted to share that, because this is something that Buddhaghosa looks at in his Visuddhimagga, where we kind of have this idea that the Buddha is the number one giver of the meditation subject. You know, if someone's got a lot of hatred, he'll teach them to practice metta. If someone's got a lot of lust, he'll teach repulsion on bodies. And so if the Buddha's not around, who can we trust? So the first one, of course, is the Buddha. If not him, then one of his 80 great disciples, all of the wonderful arahants who were enlightened. If not them, then someone who has another level of enlightenment, who's attained it through jhana and insight, a non-returner, a once-returner, a stream enterer. These are all highly refined beings and not easy to find in the world. So good luck to you is all I can say. If you can find one of these people, then they're going to be able to help you a lot. If you can't find one of those people, then someone who has at least attained a high degree of meditation, such as being able to achieve a jhana, deep meditation state, or someone who knows a bit of this, a bit of that within the suttas, or someone who knows just a small bit and maybe how to interpret it. And if you can't find someone like that, then at least someone who is conscientious, someone who is careful, because someone like this is beneficial because they care and they'll preserve the teachings well. And so this is like the descending list of people who can help us on the path. And so if you haven't got access to the Buddha, if you haven't got access to an arahant, you haven't got access to someone who knows the suttas, then a good friend, someone who is conscientious person, there's still someone who can help us develop on the path. I realize we're running out of time, so I just want to skip ahead to probably the most important part of the talk. So forgive me for not getting there sooner. I wanted to look at this idea of how the conditioning actually works, how we grow in our spiritual practice. And it's important to recognize that there are causes and conditions at play within our spiritual life. And the Buddha says that one of the main reasons we can get moving on the path is by associating with good persons. And here we have this reverse process at play. So we're just entering the sutra at this particular point. The Buddha says faith, confidence in the spiritual path has a nutriment. It's not without nutriment. What is the nutriment for faith? Hearing the good Dhamma. Hearing the Dhamma has a nutrient too, says the Buddha. What is the nutriment for hearing the good Dhamma? Associating with good persons. And so that makes sense, doesn't it? That if we're going to hear the Dhamma, we need to hear it from someone who is good, a teacher, someone like a friend. These people, because they're interested in spirituality, are already miles ahead of people who have never thought about developing their mind, never thought about good ethical conduct, never thought about the possibilities for freedom. And so associating with good persons allows us to hear the Dhamma, and hearing the Dhamma causes confidence to arise in our minds. And so this is a conditioning process. This is how the Dhamma rubs off on us. And the Buddha says that, and he gives this beautiful metaphor here, just as when rain is pouring down on the mountaintops, the water flows along the slope and fills the clefts, fills the gullies and creeks. When they become full, this fills up the pools. These becoming full, fill up the lakes. These becoming full, fill up the streams. These becoming full, fill up the rivers, fill up the ocean. And thus there is a nutriment for this great ocean, and in this way it becomes full. So the ocean, of course, relies upon the rainfall that replenishes its waters. And in the same way, we need to rely upon good people to replenish our waters. It's the first drops of rain on the mountaintop that is going to help us develop on the spiritual path. Such a beautiful image, so powerful to me, this idea of spiritual abundance raining down on the mountaintops, and this process of conditioning that can occur, the way that a few small droplets can become a stream, can become a raging river, and can become an ocean. And so I'll just finish up with the lines that wrap up this sutta. And so too, associating with good people, becoming full, fills up hearing the good Dhamma. Hearing the good Dhamma, becoming full, fills up faith. Faith, becoming full, fills up careful attention. That's yoniso manasikara. Careful attention, becoming full, fills up mindfulness and clear comprehension. That's sati sampajanya. Mindfulness and clear comprehension, becoming full, fills up restraint of the sense faculties. Restraining the sense faculties helps us to fill up the 3 kinds of good conduct. That's not killing, not stealing, not committing sexual misconduct. And these 3 kinds of good conduct help us to establish those 4 establishments of mindfulness. That's satipatthana. Satipatthana, becoming full, fills up the 7 factors of enlightenment. That's the bojjhangas. These 7 factors of enlightenment, becoming full, fill up true knowledge and liberation, vijja vimutti. And thus, there is a nutriment for true knowledge and liberation, that's enlightenment. And in this way, they become full. And so enlightenment is possible. That process that we just saw of developing good ethical conduct, restraining the senses, developing mindfulness and meditation, understanding the true nature of reality, all of this kind of stuff leads to enlightenment, but starts out by associating with good people who have an understanding of the path. And so when we have good friendships, this is the possibilities at play. This path that goes all the way to enlightenment is possible because of that nutriment of having good friends. And hearing the Dhamma from good friends, from good spiritual teachers, people who care about our well-being, hearing that Dhamma, that is that invitation to us to practice the Dhamma and to practice all of those things that come from hearing the Dhamma, knowing right from wrong, from understanding how to develop the mind. And that's why spiritual friendship is such an important part of the spiritual path. So this is a short talk about spiritual friendship and the possibilities that come from associating with wise people. So I hope that you'll all find good teachers, wise people in your life, and that you will pay attention and start to develop those qualities that those wise people have. Imitate their good qualities. Learn how to work with your mind. See the potential that is within each and every one of us to become enlightened. And so that's why good friendships is the whole of the spiritual path. And so we have a few minutes for questions. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. You can put them in the chat or you can raise your hand. Praveen.
Thanks, Bhante. That was fantastic talk. I just wanted to ask, there's a sutta that I read a while ago where the Buddha talks about these sort of 3 categories of people with whom you should associate. And in one example, he sort of suggests that, say you associate with a good person, but they send you away. Nevertheless, you should kind of go after them and kind of pursue their friendship. I guess if we're making a conscious effort to associate with people who are better than us, more skilled than us, more ethical than us, I've always generally found that such people are often very busy, full of responsibility, very time poor. So what would your recommendation be, or what do the suttas say about how we could kind of engage with such people?
Yes, so that's right. Yes, I was just looking through because I actually had intended to include that in the slideshow, but as you can see, I'm not very good with time management, and it's lucky that I didn't, because that in itself is a big topic actually, and it's a great sutta, kind of like even if they tell you to go away, you should stick around anyway. It's kind of thing. Buddha encouraging this kind of stalking behavior. And it's true that people who are some of our greatest teachers, the people who you want to hang out with, are just incredibly busy teaching the Dharma. They have many responsibilities. And so to answer your question, like how do you kind of hang out with them? I think that we're very fortunate in this age that we have access to their teachings in so many different forms, in books, in YouTube, in podcasts. We have almost we're almost like overindulged in our access to Dharma. We're completely spoiled. And what interests me is that people always want more. You know, these teachers that I know who are so busy, they keep getting more and more requests all the time on their time. And so I don't want to say that we should just accept the scraps they toss us, but they've tossed us some pretty good things, and it's actually up to us to eat them. And so there's kind of this idea that the more time you spend with someone, the more they rub off you. But this isn't what the Buddha meant. Buddha's like, I give you a teaching, do it. You know, it's not the time, it's what you do with that teaching. It's not the amount of times you get to see a teacher or do a retreat with them or hear them talk, or it's what you do with the information that you've heard that is the association with the wise. That person themselves, they're just like a vessel for this quality. And this is something that we need to identify. As I said before, it's the qualities that make someone bad, their behavior makes them bad, a fool. And in the same way, it's just the qualities that make someone a wise person. And so you can find wise people everywhere. You can see good people everywhere. They might not be Buddhist, they might not be monks and nuns, they might not be Dharma friends, they might be the local postie or someone at your deli. Like, find people who are kind and generous, emulate those qualities. Find people who have some understanding of meditation, listen to what they say, read the suttas, work out what kind of qualities you need to develop in yourself to emulate those qualities. So I guess in a roundabout way, what I'm trying to say is let's just work with what we've got. Don't make too many demands upon people, because they also have boundaries, they also have time limits. And one thing I've noticed with the internet is that it's a global Buddhist world, and I get emails from people all around the world, and I'm just a nobody, nothing teacher. So imagine the kind of things that, the kind of pressures on really big teachers. But we have so much access, so it's not like we have little, we have a lot, and it's up to us to make it happen. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Natalie.
Yes, good evening. Thank you again. Another illuminating session. But what gets me is that, you know, with all wise people around, we don't necessarily get wise without perhaps prior being foolish. And I'm aware that there are people that need help. For example, over a few decades, but this time I've managed to keep it together a day at a time, let's call it. I'm in recovery over 10 years. And there are a lot of people that come into the rooms of recovery spaces that I'm in quite regularly that, you know, you might cast as being foolish. But those people most definitely need attention, need my care, need skills that I've been practicing now for quite a while. And I suppose it's not really a question, but I think I'm kind of saying sometimes I can feel just a little overdone in that world, with also 4 parents that are 97, 98, 98 and 99. So what I'm saying is that it makes me aware that my spiritual practice has to be, and I'm serious, has to be really strong, really focused. Not saying I don't have fun. I ride a bicycle, I scoot around. I'm nearly 64, but I've been blessed with abundant energy. But, you know, as foolish as I was to go outside of those rooms a few times in 33 years, you know, the, in inverted commas, fools or people that are really struggling, I can't just go buzz off, you know, like you messed up like I did. I know you're not saying that, but for some reason, I just want to mention it, you know.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And I think you sound like a fun person to hang out with. You seem really energetic, and I love that you're riding a bike. And I also appreciate that you have been through difficult times as well, and that you point out this thing of not wanting to be cold and callous and not wanting to dismiss people, because it's so easy to do that. And I think, like, when I think about this talk and I think about how to present it, you know, there's this kind of like ways that we can kind of put it forward, and it's very black and white. And I've tried not to do that. Perhaps I'm working with it within a particular framework. But we don't want to be those people who are what's called spiritually bypassing, where they kind of they are becoming prematurely transcendental. Like, no, nothing matters. People don't matter. I'm just going to be wise and forget about those.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah. I said a little bit akin to spiritual snobbery. I've got this now. I've had my jhana experience.
Yeah,
I have in
exactly.
like, well, piss off, because like whatever. No, it can't be.
And so we shouldn't read this teaching in isolation. I mean, the Buddha is constantly going around saying, be kind, be compassionate, be a good friend. And in the stories of the Buddha, we see him dealing with people who would have been otherwise written off, like the story of Patichara. And I had an image here actually of Patichara somewhere, who or this could be Kisagotami, I'm not sure actually with this image, but here we see a woman who is distressed and naked. She's been covered up with a cloth here. And she was mad. She'd gone crazy because she'd lost her children, if it was Patichara, or child, if it was Kisagotami, and she was so distraught. And we meet people like this a lot in our lives, right?
Yeah.
We meet people who are broken, especially in places like recovery centers, or as Venerable Tate Tong Fap here will know in his work with chaplaincy, myself as a monk, I meet a lot of people who are broken. And actually, it takes a lot of centering and a lot of strength to work with these people. But, I mean, I've been broken. Yeah. I've had similar issues. Yeah. And I know, as they say, but for the grace of God or whatever, there go I. And I think that's wisdom, though, to see that people are just like us, that we are that, that our causes and conditions could lead us to those sorts of situations as well. And so we don't just abandon them, we help if we can. I mean, the Buddha says to be generous. If someone there needs some new clothes because they're naked and distressed, well, you give them new clothes. If they need food, you give them food. If you just leave them, just turn a blind eye, then you're turning away from these people, you're not being a spiritual friend. So I think that this teaching is not something that we should take in isolation, and it's not something we should take out of context, this idea of avoiding people who are fools. But think about your own spiritual, your own very close friendship circles and how much those people influence you. If we're like working with people, then it's quite a different kind of relationship, isn't it?
True.
If we're so I would just probably try to encourage you to see that we're not being asked to be cold and callous and just let people suffer. That's not what is happening in this, but more to be aware of the kinds of interactions we have predominantly and how they impact our minds. And I think
maybe you're being a bit literal, but I'm
no, it's good to think about, because I don't want people to come away from this thinking, oh, we just have to avoid idiots.
Well, you have to avoid a lot of people. Let's face it.
Exactly. That's very true. But also to remember and to acknowledge, and this is something that I've seen myself, that the kinds of people you hang out with does have an influence over you. Yeah. And I know, especially with things like people who are addicts and users, that they are seeking out friends who they can use with. And because those people are using, they might steal. And all these sorts of things flow on and flow on and flow on. And so the compassion is understanding that this behavior is conditioned and that people act in certain ways because of these outside influences and also internal influences like greed and craving and desire.
True, and you have to be practicing your own wisdom and boundaries within that parameter. Yeah. And
so that's why, understanding that there is a conditioning process at play in all of our lives, the media, our teachers, our parents, our friends. And then when it comes time to actually make friendships, think about what kind of conditioning do I want? Do I want kind and generous friends who care about me? And so this is what we're kind of invited to think about in this teaching.
Yeah, thank you. It's very good. Tough.
Anyone else? I know we're running slightly over time, so if you have to dash off. I think there was another person with a question.
Bhante, there was one question asked on in the chat. Oh, yes, it was from Daniel Jones, and it says, in the list of qualities of good friends, in the list of the qualities of good friends is the inverse true. So that is, there are people that do not have these qualities, they need to be avoided. So I guess that's exactly what we were just talking about a moment ago.
And poor Daniel, I do feel sorry for Daniel, because I know that he tried to come to last week's event, but he went to the Buddhist library and was disappointed to find out that it wasn't happening there. And so, Daniel, you missed the first part of the series where I talked about those four opposite types of friends, the fake friends, not the good-hearted true friends. And I'll share the video with you soon. And you can always find it for yourself in Digha Nikaya number 31, where the Buddha lists the types of people we should avoid and the type of people we should follow. And they are contrasted in that way. Okay. Well, I think that sounds like everyone's quiet. So...
there is a hand raised up by Praveen.
Praveen, okay.
Not to waste any time, just a question. There's I think a sutta, like the Chankama Sutta, where the Buddha talks about people who kind of walk together and, people of like qualities kind of associate with one another. And earlier in your talk, you sort of described that kind of feeling you get when you're in the company of wrong people, and you can kind of, at a gut level, know that there's something kind of a bit out of sync there. Like, could you maybe just slightly elaborate on, how we could kind of pick up on those indicators, in our lives?
It's true. And both good and bad people have these kind of different feelings for us when we're around them. If we're paying attention to So if we're paying attention to the external factors, we'll see signs that we can kind of rely upon, such as, you know, the way that they behave, the way they talk, their actions, even their livelihood, or how they kind of interact with us. And these are like signposts for us to watch out for. In the same way, people who are good, kind, and generous, when we see these kinds of actions, or people who restrain us or help us, these are things that we can see as well. And then there's the kind of internal things, which is that kind of, if we're paying very close attention to the feelings that are arising, and that the kind of perceptions that we're having, then we can, if we're very careful and quick, then we can see those happening. We can understand. But they do happen at a kind of, with people, I think they happen at a very gut level. And there's these other conditioning factors at play, which often prevent us from appreciating the wisdom of those parts. And these are things like social etiquette, good behavior, not wanting to look bad. Those sorts of things actually sometimes prevent us from appreciating those feelings that we've got. And so sometimes if people are doing bad things, other people will be hesitant to say something. They don't want to look like a killjoy, or they don't want to be creating a conflict. And we see this in like lots of psychological experiments where people don't listen to that kind of voice in their head, and it's overridden by convention, by social norms, by etiquette, and all those sorts of things. So yeah, I think it is a skill that one should develop over time, that you kind of pay attention to how you feel when you're going to see someone, when you have to call them or email, how does it feel? And examine that. And then when you're with them, how does it feel? Like examine the kind of feeling. Do you just want to get away? Are you feeling tense? Is your body tight? Do you kind of have this little nagging feeling of suspicion or doubt? And then afterwards also reflect, how do you feel after encountering that person? Do you feel depleted and enervated? Or do you feel joyous and happy and light and free? You know, so paying attention to those things before, during, and after will help you understand your relationship a bit more. It doesn't mean that you have to avoid them all the time. Just might be good to think about why those things happening. And it could be something that we can work on with that person. We can say, oh, hey, like sometimes I don't feel like hanging out with you because I've noticed you always do these things, or you only talk about yourself, or you never go halves in or shout me a meal or something. It's always me doing this for you. And it makes me feel bad afterwards. So you can actually have a conversation with them about how you feel. And so, yeah, I think that we need to undo some of those social learning sometimes and come into those very deep ways of understanding that our body and our mind has that we might not pay attention to. There's a couple of ways that you could think about that.
Thank you.
Because I notice that when I hang out with good people, and I often do because I'm surrounded by good people as a monk, people who are interested in spirituality are top quality, the creme de la creme. And so I notice that I often get to have a good feeling afterwards. I always look forward to seeing them. I'm going to be surrounded by kind and generous people who are working on their minds. I love being with them. People are usually quite happy and they have good energy. And then afterwards, I feel really satisfied that I have these people in my life. And I recognize that actually that's a privilege. That a lot of people don't have that. They go to work with bad people who are competitive and mean. They go home, they've got family members that they don't like. I've got friends who don't support them. And so I think it's a real luxury in a way to have good friends, but it's something that we can cultivate, something that we can look out for. And where family we're stuck with, maybe work people we're kind of stuck with, but friends, we get to choose. And the other thing I'd like to say is just to everyone here is to please do consider me as a spiritual friend. And I mean that. It's a sincere offer. So if you ever need to reach out, then please do. And I really do care about you and your progress on the spiritual path. And thank you for being my friends and turning up today.
Well, thank you.